We got 7 media stories from 7 different news outlets, guys. It's time for another episode of Regan's Newsround. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is REGANELITE here with another episode of Regan's Newsround, and we start with The Guardian, guys, with revealed that King Charles is secretly profiting from the asset of dead citizens. The exclusive reveals that assets of thousands of people in northwest England used to upgrade the King's property empire via the Arctic customs. Just how he's making money off people who are dead. It's bad enough that the royal family have so much of our money, and they are encrusting themselves with all this enrichment of themselves with the use of our taxpayer money. But we're talking about dead citizens here. This is pretty shocking, to say the least. I think just based on that headline itself really does stick out quite a lot of bit for those who have absolutely nothing, and apparently, according to this exclusive, they're making money off it, and it's quite horrible to say the least. So, the King is profiting from the deaths of thousands of people in the northwest of England whose assets are secretly being used to upgrade a commercial property empire managed by his hierarchy estate, The Guardian can reveal. The Duchy of Lancaster, a controversial land and property estate that generates huge profits for King Charles III, has collected tens of millions of pounds in recent years under an adequate system that dates back to the feudal times. Financial assets, known as Bond Vatica, owned by people who died without a will or known next of kin, are collected by the Duchy over the last 10 years. It has collected more than £16 million in the funds. It has long claimed that after deducting costs, Bond Vatica revenues are donated to charities. However, only a small percentage of these revenues is being given to charities. Internal Duchy documents seen by The Guardian reveal how funds are secretly being used to finance the renovations of properties that are owned by the King and are rented out for profit. The Duchy essentially inherits Bonaventure funds from people who last known addresses was in a territory that in the Middle Ages was known as Lancashire County Palling and ruled by a duke. Today, the area comprises Lancashire, parts of Merseyside, Greater Manchester, Cheshire, and Cumbria. I'm just going to pull out the. I don't know how well you can see. There's a map there on the left-hand side there. So this on the map on the left-hand side, if you try and look as best you can, I'll explain it to you. It's the ancient county Platinier of Lancashire. The estates of people resident in the ancient county Platinier of Lancashire who died without wills or heirs will go to the Duchies of Lancaster. So pretty much Lancaster, Burnley, Preston, Southport, Liverpool, Warrington, and Manchester are just some of them affected by this. The leaked Eternal Duchy's policy from 2020 gave officials at the King's estate license to use Bonaventure funds on a broadly array of profit-generating portfolios, codenamed SA9. The policy acknowledges that spending the money in this way could result in an indicible benefit to the purse and the King's personal income. I guess another argument some people may say, well, isn't it not better that they're doing this rather than taking it out of taxpayer money to fund for things? Is an argument maybe the royal people who are for the King and for the royal family may argue. Now I say it still doesn't feel right that people who are dead and their money going into the hands of the King doesn't sit well with me. In fact, I think it should go straight into charities, especially with what's going on in the country right now, in my opinion. Properties identify in other links as eligible for use of their funds, including townhouses, holiday lets, rural colleges, agricultural buildings, a former petrol station and barns, including one used to facilitate pheasants and pastoral shoots in Yorkshire. Upgrades including new roofs, double glazing windows, boiler installations and replacements of doors and lintels. One document references the innovation of a old farmhouse in Yorkshire, helped transforming it into a high-end residential let. Another upgrade is to help turn a farm building into commercial offices. Three sources familiar with the Duchy's expenditure confirmed the estate was using revenues to collect from dead citizens to refurbish its profitable property portfolio, making considerable savings for the estate. One said Duchy insider regarded the Bonaventure expenditure which has until now not been publicly disclosed, as akin to free money and a slush fund. The divisions of Bonja Vatican finds that this way has proven a financial boon to the king's estate. The practice is helping make rental properties more profitable, which indirectly benefits the king, who receives tens of millions in duchy profits this year. Income that Buckingham Palace says is private. Earlier this year, his first annual payout since inheriting the estate from his mother, King Charles received £26 million from the Duchy of Lancaster. I don't like all this money going to them. It just gives more of the incentive of why it just turns more people against the king and the royal family. And it's very different. It's a very different feel to. Sorry, I'm just making sure I have plenty of water next to me, guys. It just gives a different feel to when the Queen was around. And I know some people still didn't like the monarchy when the Queen was around, but since she's gone, I just don't feel the same about the monarchy in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I had some when the Queen was alive, but I certainly don't feel that now with this king. I really, really don't. They're very subjugated. I feel that the royal family are very subjugated, and I understand the terms of not being able to speak their mind, but surely, like, the way the country has been going over the last 13 years, for them to kind of just sit on their backsides and not say anything about how their so-called peasants of the country are kind of being made worse off with this government is quite abomination of sorts, if I were to put it. I don't like that we're giving our money to them. I really don't. If we were to have a monarchy, it would have to be something that they would make money on their own and stop taking taxpayer money. But that at the moment, that looks like it will never happen. But perhaps that will change over time for people. Perhaps. But we'll wait and see. The Guardians identified dozens of people whose money has been transferred to the King's hierarchy estate after they died in the northwest in places such as Preston, Manchester, Burnley, Blackburn, Liverpool, Ulverston and Oldham. Several have been living in rundown properties or social housings that contrast with the high-end duchy properties being transformed with the money they left behind. Some of the surviving friends were here to learn their assets were being used to renovate the King's properties, calling the practice disgusting, shocking and not ethical. Buckingham Palace declined to comment. A Duchy of Lancaster spokesperson indicated that following his mother's death, the King endorsed the continuation of policy using Bonja Vatican money on the restoration and repair of quality buildings in order to protect and preserve them for future generations. In most England and Wales, the assets of people who died without making a will have no identifiable relatives are transferred to the Treasury, which then spent on public services. The system is known as the Latin name Bonja Vatican, meaning vacant goods or assets that have no power. However, under a custom that has its roots in the medieval period, two hierarchy estates or duchies belonging to the royal family can collect Bonja Vatican from people who have died in two regions in England. They also collect leftover assets owned by companies at the point that they are dissolved. One is the Duchy of Cornwall, which generates profits for whoever is their heir to the throne. Charles used to closely manage the duchy, but last year it passed on to his son, Prince William. It collects Bonja Vatican funds from the deceased Cornish residents. Yeah, it just doesn't sit right with me at all. I don't like that. People's hard-earned money, people's assets, and that are kind of taking something that, quite frankly, they don't, in my opinion, they're not entitled to. That they shouldn't be entitled to it. I can understand it going to the Treasury, and the Treasury, if there's no other place for it to go to. I still think a part of it me feels like it should still go to the nearest closest relative if they don't have a will, but some people may disagree with me on that. I can also understand why they would want why would it would be better to go back into the Treasury rather than going to the royal family, but it's the problems of the royal family, they are not going away anytime soon, guys. So this next one, guys, this is from Sky News. I know nobody likes this person, but I think his opinion is kind of relative to the issue here of what's been going on, especially with what's happening with the I'm a Celebrity, of a certain I'm a Celebrity guest. So Nigel Farage may make a political comeback, reform UK leader suggests. Mr. Tice said the more help Nigel can give, the better, as he argued immigration figures released yesterday were a complete betrayal of Brexit. So we'll look at the numbers. It's not just him that's going to be moaning about the immigration numbers. We're going to be looking at someone else who's going to be kicking off about it as well. So we'll be looking at two different variant stories here. So Richard Tice, obviously, he's the leader of the Reform Party, former member of the Brexit Party, of course, and quite a figure that's really not going away, really, because he's always talking on GB News. He's always got a platform on there to talk to the British public, so he has a voice in there. Obviously, we'd rather have him silent. He also did an interview not too long ago with Politics Joe as well, with Ava. So it's not like we can ignore Reform UK, and they're going to have a significant chunk of votes. Richard Tice has also said that he's in favour of proportional representation, which is a good thing overall, but for their point of view, it means giving them a chance to get a slice of cake of power. But I don't feel it would be enough for them to have full control of Parliament and government as a whole, because I think it would give the Green Party the incentive they need. And that's what this story is about. This is about Nigel Farage. So Reform UK leader Richard Tice has refused to rule out Nigel Farage becoming the next leader of his party. Mr. Tice, who succeeded Mr. Farage in March 2021, admitted that the more help Nigel can give, the better. He was asked about the fate of the former UKIP leader by Sophie Ridge on Politics Hub, as Mr. Farage appeared on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here in Australia. According to Mr. Tice, people are really enjoying seeing Nigel the individual because he's revealing his personality. I hope he goes all the way in the programme, he added. Asked whether Mr. Farage can make a comeback to lead Reform, formerly the Brexit Party, he replied, I'm the leader. He made it very clear that he doesn't want to stand in a first-past-the-post election. Now, just a bit of caveat before we go any further there. So he says he's made a point he doesn't want to stand in a first-past-the-post election. But if the system was different, would he then stand? It's another question. Excuse me. And Nigel Farage, we know he's a grifter. We know he can be very manipulative with his words and very cunning. Whatever you may think of the man, he is a very smart man and a very shrewd man, and always tries to takes advantage of the situations that are ahead of him. And I can see this man doing the same again, grifting the British public into believing something that perhaps is not. But yeah, him saying that he's not going to be the leader in the future, I can see him taking up that post again. I really can. We're very pro proportional representation. That's the fairest way to conduct elections. But the more help Nigel can give, the better. Regardless of what you may think of Nigel Farage, he has influence in the British public. His words do matter. Yes, a lot of us hate him and despise him for what he's done with, especially with Brexit. But that man does have a sway. And people, and the problem is the media also back him as well, so they will give him the platform to have him speak his mind as well. And by the way, whole thing, I just want to say this about him being on I'm a Celebrity, like this is about building up his profile, and there will be people watching that show with a degree of sympathy for him because of him being in that jungle. A lot of us will be like looking at it with disdain and disgust. I'm not watching the show. If you're watching the show, that's entirely your premise. But I'm not interested in the show. I'm not interested in it at all. But this is a way for him to build up his relationship with the British public, to show a different side of him, which is what it's about. To make people forget about, hey, this was the guy that destroyed the country. This was the guy that was Mr. Brexit man. They're trying to repaint his image, redo his image into being something completely different. And that's the thing he's trying to do. That's what this is all about. That's why he went on there. And it wasn't just to get £1.5 million. It's about rebuilding his image and reputation to what he is as well. So it's important to remember that as well. Pressed again on whether it means Mr Farage taking over, Mr Tice said, "Let's wait and see." He added, "The Tories are terrified of the programme of Reform UK." In 2020, the Brexit Party applied it to change its name to Reform UK, admitting it was time to redirect our energies, which were later focused on opposing COVID lockdowns. Mr Farage stood down as the leader of the Reform Party a year later, saying his life work on securing the UK's exit from the European Union has taken the best part of 3 decades, but the time has come for him to step down. He was not complaining when we had left. He's complaining now, but he wasn't complaining then. A YouGov poll early this month put Reform on 10% of the votes, tied with the Liberal Democrats, while the Tories stood at 21% and Labour 44%. Mr Tice claimed that the Tories had abandoned Brexit as he criticised the latest net migration figures, a record-breaking 77,445,000 in 2022 as appalling. The Number 10 spokesperson admitted net migration remains far too high and that the government was taking action to bring it down. Statistically, in terms of migration numbers, guys, we are still one of the lowest in the whole of Europe, just for the record. He said that the numbers were a complete portrayal of what everybody who voted Conservative voted for Brexit. What we wanted, what we were told and promised by the Conservative government was that Brexit would take back control of our borders and would reduce immigration numbers below 200,000 a year. And instead, what's actually happening is that they've at least trebled since then, and we've got people coming into the UK about the size of Burnham every single year. There's a missing suggestion that Reform UK could do a deal with the Conservatives by standing aside at some seats, as it did in 2019 election. Mr Tice said, "I've made it very, very clear, 0 deals with the Tories. We stand in every single seat. Democracy is better when people have more options, more discussions, more debates." It is better that way, when we have more options, more discussions, more debates. But will it be the debates that we want? Or is it just going to be debates that you want? Or is it actually going to be debates that everybody's going to have? I think that's a question we should be asking ourselves. Are we all going to get a fair shade of the deals, of talks, with proportional representation? We all need proportional representation, guys. We need it. We need it for the sake of the country. And one of the things he mentioned in 1 or 2 interviews is that people just don't bother voting because they feel their vote doesn't make a difference, and that's just true. A lot of people feel that their vote doesn't matter, and and you may not like and agree with Reform UK, and I certainly don't agree with where most of their policies, but I'm certainly in favour of a reform of with proportional representation because it gives people more broader powers, and it makes their vote feel more worth than what it is right now, because it doesn't feel fair in any way, shape or form. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below on that one. Right, so the next one we got is from BBC, guys. It's been a lot of talk in it lately. Definitely check out Martin Lewis's some of his latest videos at moneysupermarket.com or just Google his name and look him up on. He's been having some really been hammering down some of the concerns, obviously, of the energy price cap that's going to rise in January, adding pressure on households, guys. It's not a good time that energy prices are going to go up, guys. So obviously I'm not very good with numbers, but I'm going to try to explain this as best as I can for those of you who are really going to struggle with this. So household energy prices will rise in January, putting more financial pressure on bill payers at the coldest time of the year. So the energy regulator Ofcom said typical annual household bills will go up from £1,834 to £1,928, a rise of £94 or 5%. That's a big chunk of money. 5%, £94. You know, people like that's like paying an extra bill on top of what you're already paying. It said the rise in bills would be worrying at difficult times for many people, but the result of higher wholesale costs faced by suppliers. Analysts have predicted that prices will fall back in March. The announcement comes the day after Chancellor Jeremy Hunt delivers his autumn statement. The regulator price cap affected 29 million households in England, Wales and Scotland. Rules are different in Northern Ireland. Ofgem sets the maximum amount that supporters can charge for each unit of gas and electricity, but not the total bill, so if you use more you will pay more. So this is what it says. So from January, the price of gas will be 7p per kilowatt hour, that's kWh, and electricity will be 29p per kilowatt hour. Households on prepayment meters will see the typical annual bill rise to $1,960. Those who pay their bills every 3 months by cash or cheque will face a typical annual bill of £2,058. The standard charge, a fixed daily charge covering the cost of connecting to a supply, will remain unchanged at 53p a day for electricity and 30p a day for gas. Dr. Craig Loki, Principal Consultant at the Energy Analysis Cornwall Insight, said that a rise in energy bills was the last thing households need, especially heading into the winter. However, he added, the UK's reliance on foreign energy supplies have left it vulnerable to price increases caused by events around the globe. Ofgem Chief Executive Jonathan Berge said the regulator had told suppliers we expect them to identify and offer help those who are struggling with the bills. But they don't care about that. They care about the profits and the share margins. That's what they really care about. It should be the government needs to be doing something to help bring these bills down. Constantly blaming global events, it's not going to solve anything. We're supposed to, aren't we going to be building, extracting new oil and gas up north somewhere? I've heard. Apparently, that's not going to help with our bills. So what's the benefit there? It's just, I'm just perplexed, guys. Mr. Bridgewood from Manchester is about £1,400 in debt on these gas and electric bills. My last payment I made on my gas was about £800. It was every penny I had left in my savings. He's just spent his entire savings paying off his bills. What kind of a life is that? People who built savings that they built up and worked hard for, and completely gone just like that. That's not right. That's money that shouldn't be going towards paying bills. It should be going towards other things. He's been out of work for a year, and he has two teenage children at home. I'm struggling to get work, struggling to pay bills, and struggling to live. You feel vulnerable, he said. Expert says he is sensibly trying to pay what he can, and is being open with his supplier. So they've got like a little graphic, how much will you pay for energy in January 24. So there's an option here. The article will be in the link in the description, guys, if you want to have a look at for those of you, particularly yourselves. It's time to look at the fixed deals. The vast majority of people pay by direct debit, with payments smoothed out over the year. Bill payers may consider a greater range of fixed deals on the market, although the regulator sounded a note of caution when shopping around. People should weigh up all the information, seek independent advice from trusted sources, and consider what is important for them, whether that's the lowest prices or securing a fixed deal, Mr. Berry said. Like I said, go and seek Martin Lewis. He will be one of the most highly respectable experts when it comes to giving you the best options. So definitely go check him out there, guys. So I'm just going to switch to the no cam here just to show you this. So this is how the off-cam price cap has changed. This is a typical household energy bill. For a typical household on a price cap, dual fuel tariffs paying by direct debit. This is the source from Ofgem Cornwall Insight here. So you can see here, this is where we're at now, obviously coming in from October to January here, and this is the energy price guarantee mark there. So ideally later on in the year it's supposed to go down, but whether it's forecast that in April, July, October it should go back down, if in theory anyway, is what they're predicting. But still, bills far too high, far too high, and not enough being done whatsoever. The freezing of the cost of standard charges comes amid rising anger about increasing fees and customers' inability to reduce what they pay. Charges rarely depend on where customers live, but the amount of energy that they use is irrelevant to part of the household bills. In most areas, the charge has doubled over the last 2 years. Ofgem recently launched a review of these charges and asked for views from the public. The regulator is consulting on whether to raise the charges by £20 a year for direct debit customers to cancel the gap in bills compared with prepayment meter customers. Now this is the key thing. They had support last year in January, and they don't have that same support this year. I'm sure this will as well, because there were differences as well here. So last winter, overall energy prices were high, and rises would have been bigger had it not been for the government's energy price guarantee limiting the typical bill to £2,500. Each household also received £400 of support over 6 months, but this year the government has not announced any equivalent scheme. So essentially what the government is doing is leaving you hung out to dry this year. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt told the BBC that he understood that a lot of households are struggling, and he points to the rises in pensions and benefits announced in the autumn statement that would help pay energy bills. But that does nothing for the ordinary person. Okay, so you're doing something for pensioners and a bit more for benefits. But what about ordinary people who are struggling to pay those bills? However, it would not be drawn on whether further direct support would be provided. So he's basically saying you're on your own. Julian Kuber, Director of Energy at Citizens Advice, said the government had missed an opportunity to increase support for households who desperately need it this winter. The latest figures from Ofgem shows customers are in debt to suppliers by a total of £2.6 billion. A typical household energy bill fell by £240 a year in October to £1,834 a year. But of that, £89 was not an actual drop in the price you pay, but actually the result of a new estimate of the typical amount of gas and electricity used by households. Had the calculations not been amended, the fall would have been £151 a year. The typical annual household consumption is now estimated to be 2,700 kilowatts a year for electricity and 11,500 kilowatts a year for gas. Like I said, I'm not an expert at these numbers, but I had already listened to Martin Lewis and his explanation on it, and I can tell just based off that it's not good whatsoever, guys. People are already struggling as it is, and that these are tough times, and it should not be this way. I understand that there are things going on in the world, we understand that, but if other nations are able to effectively pay their energy bills, we should be able to too. I mean, we're a freaking island. We have vast ways of reducing our energy bills and output. And the last 13 years, the government has just not done anywhere near enough yet to help resolve these issues. And I just generally hope that people don't die over the winter. I really hope that they can get through. I really hope that there are those with family and friends that are supporting each other as much as they possibly can. I really do mean that. Right, we're going to listen to some proper news, guys. Some broken news has just come in.
Welcome to Broken News. A healthcare think tank says that the NHS will be in perfectly safe hands once those hands have been run into the ground and then privatised. It comes after a lucrative contract to modernise the NHS and digitise patient data was handed over to a foreign firm because we couldn't possibly do that here in the UK for reasons. Our reporter has more.
For years, supporters of the NHS have said that it's better off in public hands and that money should be ring-fenced to secure its future. But a London-based think tank, whose origins and funding we haven't looked into, has told Broken News that the NHS is a Marxist-Leninist wet dream, which confusingly doesn't turn a massive profit. They've unveiled a new strategy to modernise the NHS and have reassured the British public that subsequent trickle-down economics will definitely help the country overall, as it always does, especially if it costs £100 to have a bunion removed. In a statement, they added, forcing hospitals into never-ending contracts that they can't legally escape from means lovely public-spirited yet private sector firms can charge, say, £80 for a light bulb or £12 for an oily speculum, which is by anyone's standards good business sense. Senior MPs, many of whom are handed thousands of pounds by private healthcare firms, but that's totally not relevant to this story, say it's offensive to suggest that private companies have anything but our health and well-being at heart. Well, Broken News has been speaking to the public to find out what they think.
Well, yes, it's an interesting question, but I think private healthcare is a super idea. People need to get over the outdated suggestion that the NHS is there to help them and their children when they're ill.
And what do you do out of interest?
Well, I'm the manager of a hedge fund with heavy investment in private healthcare, but that's totally not relevant to this story. But look,
privatisation is a huge profit opportunity, and I think we would be fools not to take that opportunity. I mean, look at the incredible opioid painkillers that the lovely pharmaceutical companies created in the United States with zero downsides or addiction. Wonderful stuff. We too could have that in the UK if we just believed.
So, as you've heard there, the British people have shown unanimous public support for privatisation. Back to you.
What a lovely story. That's all from Broken News. You're up to date.
Make sure you guys subscribe to Larry and Paul and check out the video on there as well. Give them a like, share across social media and all that jazz, guys. Absolutely fantastic stuff. Pointing out the obvious that the NHS is on its way to being privatised. I know, it's infuriating, but it's also important that we point this out, guys. So the next one we've got for you is an exclusive from iNews. Cities like Manchester should be allowed to charge tourist tax, Burnham says. So why should a British tourist pay those taxes when they go to other places? Let me read into this before I give my thoughts on this one, guys. So local leaders should have the powers to impose taxes on tourists to help with an area cope with a higher number of visitors, Andy Burnham has said. The great Manchester mayor said it was wrong for British tourists to pay tourist taxes when they visit places like Rome, Paris or Amsterdam, but that visiting to the UK does not subsidise local services such as street cleaning. Hotels in Manchester have already set up a city visitor charge, or £1 per room per night at participating venues, with the aim of raising money towards boosting tourism by funding large events, festivals and street cleaning. Mr Burnham said to the Metro mayors and other local authorities should have the same powers as Scotland to raise a nightly hotel tax to help fund multi-actional services that are also enjoyed by visitors. He told the Eye's Labour Plan for Power podcast, "Is there a case of going further? For sure. I personally don't think that a tourist tax should be off the table. Why should British tourists pay those taxes when they go to other places? Why should a city region like ours, which receives a considerable amount of visitors, come to see music, football, etc.? Why shouldn't we? I'm not saying that we would rush to do it, but there is a case for it. In fact, our hotels have done it voluntarily to raise money to put it into, I think, more street cleaning and those things. So there is a case for it." Mr Burnham already has a mayor's perspective to top up council taxes and pay for services delivered by his office, but he has frozen it at £31.75 a year for Band D properties for 2023-2024. The mayor has used the cash to fund Manchester's new B network of buses. Scotland is currently passing legislation allowing authorities to introduce a tourist tax on accommodation providers as a percentage rate to the cost of purchases for overnight accommodation. Wales is also planning to introduce a tourist tax. Both the Institute for Physical Studies and Northern Powerhouse Partnership have estimated that £1 per person per night tourist tax could raise about £420 million or more in England. But this compares to council tax rising above around 30 billion and business rates around 25 billion a year, according to the House of Commons Library. The UK government said in September that it plans to allow local authorities to impose tourist tax. Now, the Labour Party has been approached for comment and they have not yet responded. Just before I give my thoughts, just a reminder, guys, there's a new podcast out called Labour's Plan for Power Podcast. You can check that out at wherever you get your podcast from, Spotify, wherever you might get them, guys. So if you're interested in maybe hearing it from on there. I don't see. I think it's a small amount of money, and I think could be something that they should seriously consider. I don't think it's going to hurt tourists, in all honesty, and I think if it can help raise some money necessarily for towns and cities and whatnot, bringing in a very small amount of tourist tax, because based on the amount of people coming visiting, why not? I think this is definitely something that they should seriously consider. If we're constantly doing it abroad, then why not do it here? I don't think this is a tax necessarily that's going to hurt people in any way, shape or form. And if it raises money that can make a difference to public services, I'm all for it. And I think Andy Burnham's got a point on this one. Maybe some of you may vehemently disagree, saying that that we shouldn't be charging people for visiting. But I think, yeah, given the circumstances that in particular that England is under, that could help make a difference to help fund things for councils. I think it should seriously be considered. I think obviously the rate, the tax should be incredibly low, £1, something like that. No more than that. Should certainly will not hurt the pockets of people visiting. So I think I'm actually for something like that. I think it would definitely be helpful. That is for sure. Guys, while you're here, just a reminder, hit the like button, be greatly appreciated. If you can, share this across social media. It will be extremely helpful. Hit the bell notification icon so you'll be notified of when I go live as well, or upload a video. And just a reminder as well, you can also buy me a coffee, which you can financially support me, or you can join my Patreon too, where I have exclusive content on there as well as exclusive content on Rumble. So you can check out both those. The links for all of that stuff is in the description down below. So the next one we got is from the Independent, guys. She still won't go away because the media are still talking about her. Tories at war as Braverman attacks Sunak over a slap-in-the-face record migration numbers. The PM feels heat from the sacked Home Secretary as net migration trebles from the manifesto pledge to 750,000 a year, while the party reels from backlash over the biggest tax cuts in history. So we looked at earlier the other article, the one from Sky News, said it was 745,000, and they're saying here that it's 750,000. So we'll just say a rough estimate around those numbers is what it is, because that's what the I believe the ONS have reported. Is it the ONS? I'm pretty sure it's the Office of National Statistics. Suella Braverman has launched another stinging attack on Rishi Sunak, claiming the Prime Minister is to blame for the government's slap-in-the-face failure to stop immigration from hitting record highs. In a fresh bout of infighting, the recently sacked Home Secretary joined right-wing Tories, condemning the embarrassing net migration figures and called on the PM to take urgent steps to curb the numbers. Ms Braverman said she had pushed a 5-point plan to bring down the numbers on legal net migration, while in Cabinet suggesting Mr Sunak had refused to act. Challenging the PM, she asked, "When do we say enough is enough?" Well, let me just point out some caveats here, guys. First and foremost, you were the Home Secretary, so you had the powers to make a difference here. Secondly, we have one of the lowest intakes of net migration in the whole of Europe. It's very important to point that caveat out. And yes, while we do have migrations sitting in hotels and barges, barracks and whatnot in England and Wales, and it is really bad that they are being stuck there and not contributing whatsoever to society. You can make a difference. You can increase the processing of these migrants so that they can actually come into society and contribute to society. You chose not to do that. You chose to dehumanize these people, dehumanize their well-being and a manner when they come to this country looking to make a better life for themselves. You called homeless people a lifestyle choice when you have absolutely no idea what it's like to be homeless and sitting on the sidelines. You've pretty much chastised your own people of the same skin colour as you. You couldn't be more racist, Suella Braverman, if you tried. And for this vile woman to talk about saying that this is on Rishi Sunak, no, this is just as much on you and your actions and your words than anybody else here. Yes, Rishi Sunak must take the blunt for he's blamed as the role of the Prime Minister, but you have been completely bang out of order with your remarks and your actions and your comments. So I just want to put that caveat in there because I think it's well deserved. It comes as Mr Sunak and Jeremy Hunt suffered a backlash over the tax cut giveaway, with top economics warning that it puts Britain on course for a public sector cuts even more powerful than the austerity period of 2010. In other developments, right-wing Tory MPs backed Braverman's plan for an overall cap on net migration, so Jacob Rees-Mogg admitted to an embarrassing failure to control Britain's borders post-Brexit. Number 10 says Sunak was looking at new ways to reduce migration numbers. The Institute for Physical Studies accused Jeremy Hunt of leaving the next government a mother of headaches after tax cuts. Tory Chancellor was forced to deny being fundamentally dishonest after Tory tax cut claims were the biggest in history. Economics found that UK households will be 1,900 poorer by the end of this Parliament. Mrs Braverman said she had pushed a 5-point plan while she was Home Secretary, including an overall annual cap on net migration, as well as a new cap on the number of visas granted to foreign health and social care staff. We were elected on a pledge to reduce net migration, she tweeted on X. Today, record numbers are a slap in the face to the British public who have voted to control and reduce migration at every opportunity. In typical theory rhetoric, Mr Braverman said the government had allowed an extra million people in just 2 years, calling the numbers unsustainable before asking the PM, when do we say enough is enough? Again, as I just said, it's just rhetoric from her, just trying to stir up a hornet's nest. The numbers are high, guys. Remember, it's an important caveat, it's because of Brexit. We don't have the luxury of sending some back to France as well. Just want to put that little caveat in there too. She also suggested raising the minimum salary threshold for overseas workers to 45,000 outside of NHS jobs, shutting the graduate visa route, and a new limit on the number of dependents that foreign staff can bring with them. The official figures for the Official National Statistics (RNS) showed net migration in 2022 hit 745,000, a huge upward revision from an earlier estimation of 606,000. It's more than triple the number the Tories promised to bring down at the last election. The figures also mean the population of England and Wales is growing faster rate since 1962. Former Business Secretary Sir Jacob told BBC4 Radio that he was embarrassed about it and absolutely extraordinary figures. This is a phenomenal high level, he added, arguing that excessive immigration was to blame for the shrinking GDP per capita. It is nothing to do with migration that what's happening with the GDP, guys. This is the way that the government are just handling things poorly. Don't let immigration be the key factor into what's happening in this country with NHS, the cost of living crisis, crumbling schools, and the healthcare system. It's not because of migration. It's not because of immigrants. That's what they want you to think. Asked to be back Ms Braverman's plan for an overall cap on annual numbers, Mr Jacobs said it was not unsystematic to a rational move. I'm in favour of getting this number down very significantly. A cap is one way of doing it. In an extraordinary omission, the former Brexit Opportunities Secretary, what a stupid appointment of a title if that was, also said there had been a serious political failure in controlling Britain's borders post-Brexit. Ms Braverman also claimed that Brexit gave us the tools to cut migration and the government failed to act on it. It's time to use them. We must act out and reduce migration to sustainable levels, she said. The new Conservative group of 35 right-wing Tory MPs aligned with Ms Braverman's views, said the latest figures were existential for the party and demanded urgent action from Mr Sunak. The group, run by Danny Koger and Miriam Cates, called for a comprehensive plan to bring net migration below the 229,000 mark figure at the 2019 election, when a manifesto promise to bring down the number was made. In an anonymous warning, they said they would assess any measures brought forward by Mr Sunak, adding that the PM must act now. They added the word accidental has been used a lot in recent days, but it's ready to do or die for our party. It's not do or die. Don't take it too seriously, guys. Home Secretary James cleverly brushed off the record high migration numbers. This figure was not showing a significant increase from the last year's figures and is largely in line with our own immigration statistics. However, Mr Sunak is planning a series of new immigration crackdown measures as he prepares to head off a Tory backbench revolt. The PM is said to be preparing to cut the number of relatives foreign healthcare workers and bring down into UK the only one, ditching the shortage occupation list and raising the minimum salary requirements from 26,200 to 31,000. But it may not be enough to dampen anger. Senior Conservative MPs David Jones said the figure was very troubling, calling for Mr Sunak to consider Mrs Braverman's ideas of an overall cap on migration numbers. The Deputy Chief of the Tories European Research Group, the ERG, told The Independent that the government should also stop students from bringing family members and make sure that they return after their studies. Tory MP Sir Simon Clarke said the level was unsustainable, adding that there is no public mandate for it. Fellow ex-minister Neil O'Brien said that Mr Sunak must now take immediate and massive action from Tory massive action. Tory MP Jonathan Gullis, someone that none of us can take seriously, said the figures were completely unacceptable and would rightly anger of the British people, and he called for drastic action, including a crackdown on foreign student dependents. So we have to put it like that because he's a bit of a banger, bang in the head, in my opinion. A bit of a nutter, I think is another word to describe him. Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Schreier said the immigration figures were unacceptable. And asked about statistics on Friday, she told the Times Radio, "I think the fundamental point here is that these figures are recognised as far too high. They are unacceptable, and that's why we have been taking action." They say they've been taking action. We're taking action. What? Taking action, guys. They've taken action, apparently. Asked whether the government would cut the number of visas, Mr. Sunak, spokesperson, said it is important that we strike the right balance to help deal with the short-term pressures. But the number 10 official added, "We do believe there is further to go here, and that's why we're keeping it under review," saying officials were looking at other areas that can make it further reductions. Excuse me. The ONS said it was too early to tell if this was the start of a new downward trend, but the most recent estimates including the slowing of immigration. Professor Brian Braille, chairman of the Dependent Migration Advisory Committee, said net migration into the UK is likely to fall in the next few years. "I think the indication is that we've reached the peak," he told the BBC. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has said the net migration figures were shockingly high. Shadow Health Secretary Yvette Cooper attacked the Tories' abysmal record on skills, training and workforce planning. She called for an end to the 20% wage discount on the shortage occupation list, which allows some employers to reduce wages and recruit from overseas to help fill gaps in key sectors. Meanwhile, the Institute for Physical Studies accused Mr Hunt of failing to set out credible plans for harsh spending cuts ahead, warning that they would be more painful than those delivered by David Cameron and his Chancellor George Osborne. ISF Director Paul Johnson and Mr Hunt's successor have going to have mother and father of a headache when it comes to making the tough decisions implied by this statement. The Chancellor clashed with BBC's host, Radio 4 host Nick Robertson, after the broadcaster told him that the Tory claim of a bigger ever tax cut was fundamentally dishonest. Mr Hunt disagreed with defending this package, said, "I didn't make a start bringing down the tax burden, and I never said that we were going to get there all in one go." The Resolution Foundation said the fall of real household incomes over the course of this parliament is to the average of £1,900. Obviously, the main topic of this is about Suella Braverman. Her going blah 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 blah. No, let's be serious for a second, guys. She was the Home Secretary, and she was absolute, and some of her rhetoric and remarks and whatnot were completely out of order and unacceptable. Her comments disgusting and inhumane, to say the least. But she was still the Home Secretary, and the responsibility falls to her to help reduce the net migration numbers and so forth. But instead, they went up, and they've been constantly going up. And they kept saying, the Conservatives, they have a plan, we're going to bring it down, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And once again, they failed to do that. And instead of actually taking ownership and responsibility, they looked to point the fingers elsewhere for their actions. Oh, it's the war in Ukraine. Oh, it's global efforts. Oh, it's the European Courts of Human Rights. It's the Supreme Court ruling that we can't send people to Rwanda is the reason why. Will not take any ownership and responsibility for their actions. Like I said, these are people. These are not just numbers. These are people who are left war-torn countries, whether it's climate issues, whether it's threat to save themselves from their from being deaf, or from death threats from governments who intend to kill them. There's all sorts of reasons why they come to the UK. But the vast majority have come who wanted to work and contribute to our society. There's an economy there, but they just don't want to take it. So well, going from one chaotic woman to a chaotic thing, and that is the COVID inquiry, guys. My God, there's going to be more and more about the COVID inquiry as time goes on, but it has been a fascinating week so far, with the likes of with so many interesting stories from Sir Patrick Barnes, for example, talking about how the Eat Out to Help Out scheme and how they were completely ignored when that scheme came up. But there was also someone else talking about it as well, who was at the COVID inquiry yesterday, Angela McLean. So this is from Open Democracy, guys. Check out their YouTube channel, Open Democracy. They've been doing some fantastic work in covering the COVID inquiry. They've been putting up clips on their YouTubes of some of the highlights from the COVID inquiry. So if you want to watch some of the videos there, if you don't want to watch the whole thing, which I can understand because it is a very long inquiry, but if you just want to look at some clips and that, subscribe to their channel, Open Democracy. and you can have a look at what's been going on there as well. Obviously there's other channels that do it, but they've been on top of this very much and deserve some credit for it. So the headline they have there: the UK had enough data to lock down a week earlier, said the government's top scientist. So Angela McLean had also laid into Sunak's eat out to help out, and can you not find another way to stimulate the economy, is basically was her argument. So the UK had enough data on COVID-19 to go into lockdown on March the 16th, 2020, a week earlier than Boris Johnson told Britain to stay at home, the government's chief scientific advisor had said. With the benefit of hindsight, Angela McLean said lockdown should have been imposed a full fortnight earlier, but that the government and its scientists didn't have the data at that point. By March the 16th, however, the data was available, McLean told the UK's COVID-19 inquiry. Given what we knew about the fact about how fast this epidemic was spreading, I think there was enough information on the data to say we need to stop all non-essential contacts, says McLean, who was made a dame in 2018's Queen's Birthday Honoured List. Earlier in this module, which deals with the government's response to the pandemic, Christopher Womba, the chief civil servant at the Department of Health and Social Care now through the pandemic, admitted the UK had been at least a week late introducing the first national lockdown. In October, the inquiry also heard from Lee Kane, who worked for Johnson in 2020, and said the former Prime Minister had hostilitised over whether to lock down for 10 days after a meeting on the 14th of March 2020. McLean was asked whether she was concerned that the government didn't have a grip on the situation in March 2020, early time. Said, I was concerned that the people who were being asked to make these very consequential decisions may not have got their heads around what it would have felt like to have 3/4 of the population infected and 1% of them died, she answered. It's clearly unconsiderable. It's a lack of data. McLean did, however, say a lack of data on care homes from the NHS had been an issue on the government's scientific advisory group during the early stages of the pandemic. In an email sent on the 28th of March 2020 to other scientists working with the government, including her presenter and chief scientific advisor Patrick Vance, McLean writes, you are going to be horrified when you find out what the data flows coming out of the NHS is like. McLean was co-chair of the SPIMO, that's the Scientific Pandemic Euphoria Group on Modelling Operational Subgroup. During the pandemic, a subgroup of government's Scientific Advisory Group of Emergency, SAGE, that added that the government on COVID-19 based on infection diseases modelling and epidemiology. She said there were similar issues with the lack of data specific to the situation in devolved nations, which made it difficult for the SBIMO to do its work relevant to those administrations. On both fronts, the availability and the use of data got much better over time, she said. McLean added there was a lack of transparency from the Treasury over any economic modelling that was done before. Whether modelling the Treasury was to consider the economic case of the pandemic and interventions, I've never seen, she said. When asked by the inquiry's lawyers if she felt the Treasury had suffered sufficient epidemiological modelling experience, McLean said that she could have used some more. It would have been sensible to seek outside help, she added. The worst moments. The inquiry had previously heard that Rishi Sunak did not consult the government's top scientists before launching the Eat Out to Help Out scheme in August 2020. We've covered this on live streams and various videos already, guys, that they weren't covering the Eat Out to Help Out scheme just for those references. I don't know anything about the scientific advice that went to that, McLean confirming in the hearing. So I know a person who wasn't told. When asked what advice had been given, McLean said that there wasn't much room for increasing mixing and that the kind of mixing that should be avoided in households was households indoors. How can you not find another way to stimulate the economy? Can you not find another way? I think it's the question we should be asking. Is what it's saying there. Is there another way you can stimulate the economy without having the needs of putting people's lives at risk? Is basically what the argument she was putting there. In her written evidence to the inquiry, McLean described the end of summer and early autumn of 2020 as the worst moment of the pandemic. It was very frustrating for us to be asked to advise the government and to advise them on what the autumn would be difficult and that the difficulty would manifest as rising number of infections. But nothing happened, she told the inquiry. The inquiry was showing minutes from a September the 20th, 2020 meeting involving Johnson, Sunak and 7 leading scientists, including McLean, Vance, and the Chief Medical Officer, Quick Whitty, entitled, Should the Government Intervene Now, and if so, how? Prior to the meeting, McLean messaged Valance to ask, does it fit your plan if I rock up and say reasonable worst case scenarios, assuming someone gets a grip at this stage of things would be great if that happened, ? When she asked if she felt she got the message across, McLean replied, I said those words but nothing happened, so inadequately at best. They knew the damage, the scientists, and again, it just felt like they were ignored and more should have been done. Emergency planning. McLean served as the chief scientific advisor at the Ministry of Defence during the pandemic and was co-chair of the SPIMO, and she told the inquiry that she had not heard of Operation Nimbus, a planning exercise held in February 2020 that was mentioned by Ben Warner, a data expert brought into Number 10 to put his evidence to the inquiry. If I had known in early March the excess Nimbus had happened, I might have been encouraged. If I had known who had been there, I might have been discouraged, said McLean, referencing the fact that secretaries of state responsible for such areas such as health were not in attendance. Another one who had difficult decisions, difficult choices to make, and was careful with her words, because if she had said certain things, she may not have been in the position that she was in. I just feel for the scientists in that situation, because they all they could do was advise with the best data that they had for themselves at the time, and there were some cases where they had more than enough adequate data, in some cases they did not. The benefit of hindsight, as she said in there, the lockdown should have happened 2 weeks ago. And I just think, when I look back at when we had the Cheltenham Festival, the football match, I mean, it was just a week or two, wasn't it, where Boris Johnson was shaking hands with a England rugby player, and I was just thinking to myself, did he not understand the consequences of what was going to happen? It's easy for us to say that in the benefit of hindsight, but from what we heard consistently so far during this inquiry is just how chaotic the government really was. And these are just more pieces to a puzzle of what happened behind the closed doors of Number 10 during that time. Guys, got one more article for you guys. This one is from Barline Times. So the headline is, the price of democracy in the UK has just gone up massively. The Conservatives once set the rules to benefit themselves. Increasing the amount political parties can spend on general elections is another warning sign for the British democracy. So yes, political parties can now spend even more money on general elections than they need to, guys. I'm not looking forward to reading this. The government this week has sneaked out an announcement increasing the amount that political parties can spend on general elections by around 80%. This major change in election rules cannot be challenged by opposition parties. It is the government's party setting the rules to benefit themselves. In 6 general elections since the spending limit was introduced for national parties in 2000, a limit of approximately £20 million in the year before general elections has proved adequate. Only the Conservative Party has consistently come close to spending up to this limit. In the last 4 general elections, the Conservatives have spent between 80% and 97% of the legal maximum. In contrast, Labour has spent between 42% and 69% of the limit. Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats have spent 25 to 36% of the limit until the 2019 general election, when the party spent 79% of the limit, fueled by anti-Brexit donations. Just before I go any further, although a lot of people are turning their backs, and businesses and investors have turned their backs on the Conservatives, there are still going to be a lot of those donors who are going to throw huge amounts of money into the Conservative machine to try and keep them in power, because they know that despite Labour will be a so-called party for business, the Conservatives are ones that they have in their pocket, and they're going to throw a lot of money into this machine, and I'm very concerned that they're going to be able to spend even more money than they had before, the Conservatives, and they really are going to ramp it up. They're going to ramp it up really, really hard to try and paint this picture that it's all something else, that this cost of living crisis, the NHS, the things that are crumbling, and what's happening in our country. They're going to do absolutely everything to finger point it anywhere else but themselves. And the question is the British public going to hold their nose despite whatever the Conservatives throw at them? And I think that's going to be a question to be asked. Only one party, therefore, is likely to benefit substantially from the increasing maximum limit for the spending party. The change has not been supported by the Electoral Commission, the watchdog powers of which have been watered down by the government. The House of Commons question from Lib Dem MP Alistair Chimmel reveals that the Commission's concerns in advancement of the announcement, a member of the Commons Committee overseeing the Commission. Labour MP Cat Smith said the UK's government proposal to increase the spending limits and donations to report thresholds represents a significant change to the UK's political financial controls. The Commission's research shows a long-term decline in public confidence in the political finance system. Any changes to the spending or reporting thresholds must be supported by rigorous analysis, including on the likely impact on public confidence and transparency. The Commons has not seen any evidence to support these changes. It is concerned that the proposed risks damaging the transparency of political donations and gives significantly more scope for higher spending parties to campaign. The government's new policy is a complete reversal of the pledges made by David Cameron when he became Prime Minister in 2010 to take big money out of the policy. All attempts to place a cap on the size of the donations from any one source since then has been resident. It will now be legally possible for a single billionaire to stump up the entire 36 million, or for 6 billionaires to pay £6 million each to cover the party's total general election spend at the national level. They'll have all the money they need in the world to give them the biggest power splurge possible in every single constituency. Despite the hate, despite a lot of anger and frustration at this government, they're still going to have a lot. They are going to be able to close that polling gap. They are going to close that gap. There will be people who will fall for this. It's inevitable. After a general election, it may never be known at what price and what position has been extracted in return for such donations. UK citizens living overseas for longer than 15 years will now be able to vote in next year's general election, but should billionaire tax exiles be able to give millions to political parties? No! If the kind of financial fair play rules are now being applied to football clubs were applied to political parties, then the Conservatives would be deducted dozens of seats, probably more seats than those given their present majority to force through the rule change in their favour. It is the equivalent of Manchester City winning the Premier League and then setting new rules, allowing its 15 players on the pitch while its opponents have 10. If and when this government is defeated, it must have fairer, more democratic rules in place. Yeah, so they're gonna have the even more wind in their favours, pretty much, guys, with this change. So they're going to be able to have to get more money into them, far more than Labour, Lib Dems, Reform, all the other political parties. And it really is going to be such a battle. It's going to be such a battle for Labour to try and oust the Conservatives. Yes, at the moment the polls are in their favour and people are fed up with it, but they're going to use a lot of this money to smear the Labour Party and disingenuous people from voting Labour, which may give them the benefit that they need to remain in power. And none of us want the Conservatives remaining in power any more than it needs to be, guys. This is a great deal of cause for concern, that is for sure, guys. What do you guys make of it? What do you guys make of all the stories that we have covered today? We have reached well over the threshold. Thank you very much for everyone for watching Regan's Newsround. I hope you enjoyed and found some of these stories fascinating, educational, informative for you. If you can, hit the like button on your way out, it'd be greatly appreciated. If you can, also share across social media. Hit the bell notification icon so you'll be notified of when I upload another video. And of course, if you want to, and you're under no obligations to, but it would really help me, if you want to financially support me, you can do so by buying me a coffee, which is the links in down below, or join me on Patreon, where you can get access to exclusive content. So thank you all very much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.